first noticed the strange visions one crisp November evening as I walked home through the narrow alleyways of my neighborhood. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the world bathed in that peculiar twilight glow where shadows seemed longer and darker than they should be. The air carried the faint scent of rain, and the distant hum of city life played like a ghostly chorus. The first vision struck with no warning. For a moment, the world shifted. The quiet alley blurred, and I was standing in the middle of a room I didn't recognize. The walls were cracked, smeared with something that looked like soot, and an unnatural chill hung in the air. Furniture was overturned, as if someone had fled in haste. A single lamp flickered in the corner, casting erratic shadows that danced across the room. Then I saw it. A symbol scratched into the floorboards. A spiral enclosed in jagged lines. It seemed alive, pulsating faintly as though it were breathing. My breath caught in my throat as my pulse raced. I blinked hard, gripping the rough brick wall beside me. The vision dissolved, and I was back in the alley. My legs trembled, and I had to steady myself against the wall. Around me, everything was as it should have been. Quiet, ordinary, yet I could still feel the cold from that room, a lingering chill that seemed to crawl beneath my skin. Shaking my head, I stumbled home. I told myself it was exhaustion. I'd been working late shifts, skipping meals, and maybe I just needed rest. But the unease followed me through the door, into the dim safety of my apartment. That night, I dreamt of the symbol. The next morning, I received a message that deepened the mystery. It was a voicemail from Grace, my closest friend during university. Her voice was hurried, breathless, and filled with an urgency I'd never heard before. "Alex, I need your help. Please. I think I've uncovered something. Something I wasn't supposed to. It's happening again. Meet me at the cafe on Elm at noon tomorrow. I can explain, but we don't have much time." The message ended abruptly. There was no callback number, and when I tried dialing her old one, I was met with the dull beep of disconnection. Something was wrong. Grace had always been the rational one between us, grounded, analytical. For her to sound like that, it wasn't like her. And what did she mean by, "it's happening again"? I thought back to our college days, to her fascination with unsolved mysteries, her relentless curiosity about the uncanny. The vision from the night before returned to me. That pulsating symbol, alive in the floorboards, burned itself into my mind. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone, but now it felt like some invisible thread was tying it to Grace's plea. I resolved to meet her, though an inexplicable dread gnawed at the edges of my resolve. I arrived at the cafe early, taking a seat by the window where I could watch the street. The rain had started in earnest by then, streaking the glass with silver rivulets that distorted the outside world. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the hum of muted conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine. No sign of Grace. As the minutes ticked by, I found myself growing restless. My gaze wandered, drawn inexplicably to a mirror mounted on the far wall. It was oldly, its edges tarnished, the silver backing worn thin in places. In its reflection, the cafe appeared distorted, like a faint echo of the real world. Something shifted in the mirror. I blinked, leaning closer, and there it was again, a flicker of movement, just at the edge of the frame. A figure, indistinct and shrouded in shadow, lingered near the counter. But when I turned my head to look directly, the space was empty. My chest tightened as I glanced back at the mirror, only to find the figure gone. A hand touched my shoulder, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Alex!" I turned to see Grace standing there, drenched from the rain. Her face was pale, her eyes woed with something that looked like fear. She slid into the seat across from me, glancing nervously at the door before speaking in a hushed tone. "I don't have much time," she said, pulling a damp notebook from her bag. "You're the only one I can trust. "What's going on?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. She opened the notebook to a page filled with hastily sketched diagrams and notes. My breath caught as I recognized the symbol, spiraled lines enclosed in jagged edges, identical to the one from my vision. "I've been seeing things," Grace whispered. "Places I've never been, symbols like this. At first, I thought it was stress, but it's more than that. They're leading me somewhere, showing me things that aren't possible." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't mentioned my own vision to anyone, yet here it was, mirror in her notebook. "I've seen it too," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Grace's eyes widened, and her grip on the notebook tightened. "Then you're part of this," she said. "They've already marked you." "Who are they?" I demanded, my unease growing with every word. She hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the window. "I don't know, but I think they're trying to show us something we're not meant to see." Before I could press her further, the lights in the cafe flickered. A heavy silence fell over the room, as if the air itself had thickened. Grace's hand shot out, gripping mine. "They're here," she whispered. The flickering lights cast shifting shadows across the cafe, amplifying the unease that had already taken root in my chest. Grace's hand gripped mine tightly, her knuckles white. Her wide eyes darted toward the mirror on the far wall. I followed her gaze and froze. The glass rippled. It wasn't a trick of the light or a distortion caused by the cafe's flickering bulbs. The mirror's surface undulated like a disturbed pond, faint waves spreading outward from an invisible center. Within its depths, shadows moved, dark, humanoid shapes that seemed to press against the surface from the other side. "We need to leave," Grace whispered, her voice barely audible over the low hum that had begun to permeate the air. Before I could respond, the lights steadied and the cafe returned to its normal hum of activity. The mirror's surface stilled, reflecting nothing more than the ordinary scene around us. No one else seemed to notice what had happened. Conversations resumed, coffee cups clinked, and the barista called out orders as if the world hadn't just shifted. Grace was already on her feet, shoving the notebook into her bag. "Come on," she urged, her voice tight with urgency. Outside, the rain had turned to a light drizzle, the air thick with the damp smell of wet asphalt. Grace led me down the street, her pace quick and determined. I followed, glancing over my shoulder every few steps, half expecting to see the shadows from the mirror pursuing us. She finally slowed when we reached an abandoned art gallery at the end of a narrow alley. The faded sign above the door read, "Gallery of the Unseen." Its windows were dusty, and the faint outlines of long-forgotten posters clung to the glass like ghosts. "This place, why here?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Grace hesitated, her hand resting on the door handle. "This is where the visions lead me, every time." With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, and we stepped inside. The gallery was a relic of the past, its interior filled with cobwebbed corners and the stale scent of neglect. The main exhibit hall stretched before us, dimly lit by a row of flickering overhead lights. Paintings lined the walls, their surfaces obscured by years of dust and grime. But it wasn't the paintings that held my attention. It was the mirrors. Dozens of them, all shapes and sizes, adorned the room. Some hung on the walls, while others leaned against pedestals or rested haphazardly on the floor. Their surfaces gleamed faintly, catching the dim light in unsettling ways. As I moved closer, I noticed that none of the mirrors reflected the room as it was. Instead, each one showed distorted, fractured versions of reality, as though they were windows into another world. "This place feels wrong," I said, my voice echoing in the empty hall. Grace nodded, her expression grim. "I've seen these mirrors in my visions. They're connected to the symbols somehow. I think they're showing us something, but I don't know what." I approached a large, ornate mirror in the center of the room. Its frame was intricately carved with spirals and jagged patterns that mirrored the symbol from my vision. As I gazed into its surface, a cold shiver ran down my spine. The reflection didn't show me. Instead, it displayed the room behind me, empty and shadowed, except for a single figure standing in the far corner. The figure was tall and shrouded in darkness, its edges blurring like smoke. My breath caught, and I turned to look over my shoulder. The corner was empty. "Alex?" Grace's voice jolted me from my trance. "What is it?" I looked back at the mirror. The figure was gone, replaced by the fractured reflection of the room. "Nothing," I lied, stepping away from the mirror. But the chill in my bones lingered. The further we ventured into the gallery, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air felt heavy, thick with an unplaceable energy that made it difficult to breathe. The mirrors grew stranger, their surfaces displaying scenes that shifted and shimmered like mirages. Some showed empty streets cloaked in fog, others unfamiliar rooms filled with flickering candlelight. And always, in the corners of my vision, I caught glimpses of movement, shadows that disappeared the moment I turned to look. "This can't be random," Grace muttered, her fingers tracing the edge of one of the mirrors. "It's like they're showing us pieces of a puzzle." "But what's the picture?" I asked, frustration seeping into my voice. "What are we supposed to see?" Grace didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on a small, circular mirror near the far wall. Unlike the others, this one was pristine, its surface reflecting the room perfectly. As she stepped closer, the symbol etched into the frame caught the light, glowing faintly. "This one," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's different." I joined her, staring into the mirror. For a moment it seemed ordinary, just a reflection of us standing in the gallery. But then the image shifted. The gallery dissolved, replaced by a vast expanse of swirling mist. Within the mist, faint shapes moved, their forms too distorted to make out. And then the voice came. Low and resonant, it spoke in a language I didn't recognize, its syllables flowing like water over stones. The sound vibrated in my chest, filling me with a mixture of awe and dread. "What is it saying?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, unable to tear my eyes from the mirror. As the voice continued, the shapes in the mist grew clearer. One of them stepped forward, its form coalescing into a tall, cloaked figure with glowing eyes. It raised a hand, pointing directly at us. The voice grew louder, its cadence more insistent, and the gallery around us seemed to dim. Grace grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Alex," she whispered, "I think it's trying to show us where to go." The glowing eyes in the mirror blazed brighter, and the voice cut off abruptly. The gallery was silent once more, but the sense of foreboding remained. We exchanged a glance, unspoken understanding passing between us. Whatever lay ahead, we couldn't turn back now. The storm had arrived with a fury, lightning slicing through the sky as rain poured in relentless sheets. Grace and I stood at the edge of the woods, staring into the dark expanse. The air was alive with an almost electric charge, heavy with the promise of revelation or disaster. "This is it," Grace said, clutching her soaked notebook to her chest. Her voice was steady, but her pale face betrayed her fear. The visions had guided us here, the edge of the woods behind the gallery. There, hidden among the gnarled trees and overgrown brush, was a forgotten structure that neither of us remembered seeing before. Its shape loomed in the storm, a crumbling stone archway draped in moss and vines. Symbols identical to those in Grace's notebook were etched into the stones, their lines glowing faintly in the stormy darkness. "It feels alive," I murmured, unable to shake the sensation that the archway was watching us. Grace nodded, We're meant to go through it. That's what they've been showing us. I wanted to protest, to suggest turning back and forgetting this ever happened. But the pull was too strong. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a compulsion, a force beyond our understanding urging us forward. We stepped through the archway together. The world beyond the arch was not the one we had left. The air was colder, thinner, and carried a faint hum that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. Mist coiled around our feet, rising in tendrils that seemed to grasp at our legs as we moved. The ground beneath us was soft, like damp earth, but when I looked down, it was featureless, an expanse of gray that stretched endlessly. Ahead, a faint glow pulsed, the same rhythmic light I had glimpsed in the mirror at the cafe. We followed it, each step taking us deeper into this strange, liminal space. The hum grew louder, resolving into overlapping whispers that ebbed and flowed like the tide. Their words were indistinct, but filled with an undeniable urgency. Then we saw it. In the center of the mist-shrouded expanse stood an enormous, twisting monolith of black stone. Its surface was polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflecting the mist and the faint light around it. The symbols were carved into every inch of its surface, each one pulsating faintly like a heartbeat. "It's calling to us," Grace whispered, her eyes fixed on the monolith. As we approached, the whispers coalesced into a single, resonant voice. It was neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel. It was simply vast. "You have seen the truth," it said, the words vibrating in the air around us. "And now you must choose." Grace and I exchanged a glance, both of us trembling under the weight of the voice. "Choose what?" I asked, my voice cracking. The monolith's glow brightened, and the mist around us began to shift. Images emerged within it, glimpses of the visions we had experienced, the broken room with the spiraled symbol, the fractured reflections in the gallery's mirrors, the shadowy figure with glowing eyes. "The balance must be restored," the voice continued. "One must remain, to anchor the truth. The other shall carry it forward." The words struck like a physical blow, and I staggered back. "What does that mean?" I demanded, though deep down, I already knew. The whispers returned, rising in intensity until they became a deafening chorus. Grace clutched her ears, her face contorted in pain. The monolith's glow pulsed faster, the symbols on its surface burning brighter with every beat. "Alex," Grace gasped, tears streaming down her face. "It's me. I'm the one who has to stay." "No!" I shouted, the sound swallowed by the storm of whispers. "There has to be another way." But as I looked into her eyes, I saw the truth reflected there. Grace had always been the one to chase the unknown, to question the boundaries of reality. Now she was being pulled into the heart of it, bound to this strange liminal world. She smiled, a small, sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's okay," she said, her voice steady. "I think I was meant for this." Before I could respond, the monolith's glow engulfed her. The mist swirled violently, and then, with a final pulse of light, she was gone. I stood alone in the mist, the whispers fading into a deep, resounding silence. The monolith's glow dimmed, its symbols fading until they were no more than faint etchings. The archway appeared before me once again, beckoning me back to the world I had known. When I stepped through, the storm was gone. The woods were silent, the air still. But something inside me had changed. The truth of what I'd seen, of what Grace had given herself to, weighed heavy on my soul. And as I turned back toward the archway, I saw it, just for a moment. Her reflection, faint and fleeting, watching from the other side,